All right. Let me make sure I have this pulled up here, though.
So, intergenerational ministry is crucial.
Yeah. Well,
Hey,
you can start when I tell you to start.
Mama's house, right? If you don't go to Mama's house,
Dude, that's a good point.
just call it Mama's house.
Yeah.
The
All right.
potty.
So today I'm here with Tyler Redman once again, the man, the myth, the legend himself, the ranking winner of most podcast appearances on this podcast.
Hey, I'll take it.
That's 3.
Do I get a trophy or like
3
a dessert
podcasts.
or something?
You get the gift that's greater than all that. You get me saying thank you and paying you no money.
Oh, okay.
Or not even buying you lunch. We just had lunch right now. Kind of a dangerous move. We just had cheeseburgers right before the podcast. Do you preach before? Do you eat before you preach?
No.
On purpose?
Like, are you talking about Sunday mornings?
Yeah, like do you avoid eating before you preach?
I don't normally eat breakfast.
Like speak on
ever.
the summer series or something, like in the evening. I try not to have a big hefty dinner before I preach. Do you do
no,
that?
I don't even think about it.
Oh, it's not a factor for you.
No. But I don't eat breakfast usually. So Sunday mornings I just don't eat. But like we have on Wednesday nights we have a meal before.
And you eat
we have
whatever
class.
it is?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
Definitely.
I have to kind of be careful sometimes because I'm not in as healthy a shape as you are. Now you're not exactly a bastion for good health yourself. But I'm not in the best shape. So sometimes if I eat, I get a little heartburn, a little indigestion. Sometimes I think about getting a cup and putting crushed Tums around the rim of it or something, when I'm drinking the soda or whatever.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'm here with Tyler.
what's up?
What's up? What's up, indeed. We're going to be talking today about intergenerational relationships in the church. Intergenerational relationships in the church. That's not a term I really use, by the way. Do you ever use that term?
Never.
Okay.
But we all understand, or at least we can grasp the concept and understand its importance.
Yeah, basically just relationships between people of different generations, intergenerational in that sense, and particularly in the church. I've talked about this some. In fact, the first time I talked about it, I remember I was going to a preacher's luncheon many years ago. We have some out here in our area, and the way they were doing it back then was like they would ask one preacher each time to do like a lesson or a class or a study, whatever. And so they asked me to do one on intergenerational relationships in the church because I was the only young guy in the room, and all the rest of them have been preaching for so long. And so
he'll do it.
They're like, we want the young guy's perspective on that because
that's probably what it was.
Yeah,
definitely.
They're like, we need the young guy to teach us. So. No, but really, it was kind of like, yeah, you're a cool, hip kid, you probably know about that. So anyway, I gave one, and that I had never really given much thought to it until I started to think about that some more. You've been a youth minister, youth and family minister for how long?
Just over 4 years.
Over 4 years.
Yep.
How soon into doing that, and maybe even before that, did this kind of a thought process come up in your ministry?
So interestingly enough, my title is youth and family minister, right? And I remember when I first took over the youth and family ministry at the Landmark Church of Christ, where I currently do ministry, I really fought the title because I thought that the youth would take up so much of my focus with planning events and planning Bible studies and lessons and doing all those things that if you threw family under my umbrella, that it would just be too much work for me, basically, in a 40-hour week with a wife and kids and all that. Yeah. And so I really fought it. But since then, I've really embraced it because I have come to find out that you really can't do ministry to youth unless you're involving the entire family, specifically the parents and even the siblings, and even grandparents. And so I can't imagine doing my ministry right now to the teens and families that I work with not even talking to their parents, not even including their parents in what we do. It just wouldn't be possible, I don't think.
So there's that with the relationship between the kids and their own families. Did you notice relatively early on that there was some kind of a disconnect between just the younger generation in the church in general and the older generation? Like some kind of a, I know that there are superficial disconnects, but like, did you notice something deeper than that early on, or did you realize that later?
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I had the blessing of going to the Landmark Church of Christ for several years before taking over the youth and family ministry. And so I knew a lot of these people already, had relationships already. I knew their personalities, their quirks, and, you know, how they interacted with the body already. And so I was able to pick up on things prior to becoming the youth and family minister that maybe once I took over, it would have taken me several years to figure out. But yeah, there was a difference. Obviously, just by looking at people's personalities, their level of depth of knowledge, the way they approach the world and society and life, lots of differences. But I think we're going to see very clearly today, especially if we look at some scripture, that God's design for the body is to be just that intergenerational, where you have multiple generations teaching and showing by example the younger generations.
Yeah, I think to be PC about it, you know,
you're good at that. Yeah,
I think like when I approach this conversation, and if I use like, if you mention Landmark or I mention Seagoville or any other church that I've personally been a member of, I give a lot of grace in the sense that like, I know that by nature of different ages, different cultures, there will naturally be some separation. Like there are some big differences in the way I grew up as opposed to some of the people here at Seagoville who are 80 years old. And the same goes with you. I know you're close to 80. You're pushing 80 pretty soon.
You know,
you're up there.
Yeah.
You're kind of like an 80-year-old man in a, what are you, 50 or something? you're kind of like an older soul anyway. But I mean, like, just by nature of age, culture, upbringing, and stuff, there's going to be some separation. I mean, do you agree that that's okay for that to exist to a certain degree, I guess?
Yeah, and I think it's even healthy at times, because we can't learn from people that are exactly like us, right? Or at least not a lot, not to the depth that God is looking for in our growth spiritually and personally, emotionally, when it comes to our connection within the church. So I think it's good. It pushes growth. It pushes depth, especially for those of us that need that maybe don't have that level of depth or closeness with God. Yeah, I think it's extremely important that we have that.
Yeah, I've asked the question before, and again, it's not the same in every church. Some churches are, I mean, I know some churches where everybody knows everyone super well. They spend time with each other all the time. Typically, that's like in the small congregation, right, where there's just comprised of a few families, so everyone knows everyone. But sometimes when you get into more, when you get to bigger numbers, even not huge numbers, like Seagoville, we don't have by any means like a mega church or anything. But once you start to get to a certain number, and I don't know what that is, a certain range, people start to come here without knowing each other's names and stuff like that, and without talking to each other. And what I found in my experience, that typically happens most often, that I don't know someone else's name or someone doesn't know someone else's name. That typically happens when it comes to the realm of age. Like, I think when you become a member of the church, typically you tend to gravitate towards all the people who are your age, the people you know the best, or people who are your age. And like you said, there is an element to that is good. Would you say there's an element to that is potentially problematic, if not already problematic?
Yeah, definitely. We need to diversify our sphere of influence, and because we can only learn so much from those that are just like us, or in the same circumstances in life as us, or the same age as us. Because you can only, let's say you're a 15-year-old teenage boy, there's only so much you can go through in your life by the age of 15, right? And so if you are able to, and some more than others, of course, but if you're able to expound that sphere of influence just a little bit, you're able to learn things from just being associated or just being around these people who have gone through some pretty heavy things. You might be able to skip a step. You know, they may have learned it the hard way because they did it wrong the first time. I can think of several times in my life where that was the case. And if I had surrounded myself with diverse types of people, then I might have been able to avoid that without making the mistake.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because so much of the time you hear people who are much older, Christians who are much older, who say things like, and even parents say this, I don't want you to make the mistakes I made, right? There's something that's so transcendent about the human experience that even though our cultures are different, our temptations and our struggles are basically identical. It's just like, you know, your temptations and struggles and the mistakes you made took place while TV was still in black and white.
Right.
But, you know, for me, it's like, you know, TV, I wear it on my eyeballs as goggles. You know?
No kidding.
But it's all the same. If you had to answer this question, why do intergenerational relationships matter then? I know you just said it's kind of like a, what did you say it was? Like you can skip a step by not having to make a mistake because someone else already made the mistake. But why would you say in short, or however many words you want to use? You can speak as much as you want to, or in long, or medium. Intergenerational relationships matter. Because I think before we even talk about them, we should sell people on why they matter. Because there is this church culture today, and sometimes this does bleed into even relatively smaller churches like where we are, like, you know, Seagoville, 150, 160 people, Landmark, more than that. But like, you know, there's the mega churches that have 500 people, 1,000 people, even way more than that, right? Yeah. Where you only know like 20 people from there. Yeah. And it's normal for you to walk in, not know almost anyone, and then just walk out. Yeah. I remember I've been to churches like that before growing up. I remember I'd go visit churches like that, and there's like, you only go in with your family, and then you leave with your family, and there's like no intermingling. And no one's like sad about that. They're like, this is normal. Like, there's so many people. How are you going to meet all these people? Yeah. You don't go to Disneyland. Yeah. With the intention of like, hey, I got to meet some people here. Yeah, there's too many people.
Try to avoid people.
So why would you say these relationships matter between different generations in general?
Well, one of my favorite ways to look at intergenerational relationships.
Tough one. Say that 5 times.
That's intergenerational relationships. I got it that time. Is through the lens of youth and family ministry, right? So looking at through the eyes of a teenager. Have you ever read Sticky Faith?
No, but I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, it's really good for ministry in general, but specifically when you're talking about teenagers, kids. They talk about in there, one of the best ways to get your child's faith to stick after they graduate and they leave the youth group and maybe they go off to college is to have relationships with other adults within the congregation that are not their youth leaders and are not their parents. And they back it up with a bunch of statistics and basically all the research shows that that's exactly the case, because you have a litany of other adults who have a similar moral and value and belief system to your parents that are pouring into your life. And it's not just like random people. These are people that you know, that love you, that care about you, that have your best interest at heart. And not only do they have those things, but you know they have those feelings towards you. It gives you another outlet of somebody you may approach for advice, or maybe you've got something on your heart that you just don't feel like talking about with your parents. So the more relationships you have like that, the better your faith will stick as you leave high school.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but being that you've read that book and I haven't, is there, maybe this isn't the focus of the book, but is the same true with the inverse, not just when it comes to young people and having older relationships, but is the opposite true? Does the book talk about that?
It does not talk a lot about that. It kind of focuses from a youth perspective, but I would imagine that it would be the case in reverse, because if think about it, if you go into a church building on, let's say, a Sunday morning, and you are greeted by and are greeting a whole host of other people, old, young, big, small, men, women, boys, girls, and they're all happy to see you, they're all happy to check on you, to talk to you, and you are the same to them, how much more likely are you to stay and to return and to live life with and to grow that congregation than if you walk in with your family, as you said, and then just walk out and never talk to anybody?
Yeah. I think you could even, with that, make the argument that, like, okay, let's say there are no studies on whether or not the opposite is true. Let's say there are no studies there are studies on how it's good for a young person to have older relationships, people who pour into them on the spiritual level. And maybe some people who are older seeing this might be like, well, the same is not the case for me, so I'm not going to emphasize that. Mm-hmm. If you care, though, if you really do care about the health of the church family that you're part of, you're going to take that responsibility on yourself to say maybe I'll be here whether or not they're here,
Right.
but the opposite isn't true. And so I'm going to invest in them to keep them strong. Not just, I don't like sometimes how we're like, well, we got to think about the future. We got to think about 10 years ahead. And it's like, these people are living the Christian life now, and we should care about them now. Forget 10 years ahead. Yeah, a byproduct of taking care of the church now is taking care of it 10 years ahead, but we don't. Does that make sense? I don't do this for 10 years from now. I do this for today. I do this for tomorrow. I do this for the immediate time. Does that seem fair? Like, you can make the argument that even if the opposite isn't true, and I think it is the case, I would say, just from my own experience, yeah, young people, they need to have those older relationships to keep them strong and grounded because they're younger. They don't have the experiences. They don't have the knowledge. But people who are older, they don't need that as much. They have the experience. They have the knowledge. They're more centered emotionally and things like that. But they should be so invested in fostering those relationships if they want to take some ownership over their place in this family, the church.
Right. Yeah. And, for the teen or for the kid, the child, it brings about a sense of direction and guidance. But I would think for the older persuasion, it would bring about a sense of value and purpose and accomplishing this feeling of being needed and wanted, and like my opinion matters, and my life circumstances weren't all for naught. I can use them for good, whether I made good decisions or bad decisions. I can pour into somebody else's life to try to help them do better than I did. And maybe you did an excellent job, but we could always do better.
You did say something right now that perked my ears up a little bit. In the last time we did the podcast, you were saying words like tizzy, you said hogwash.
Yeah.
Right now, you just referred to older people. You said they're people of the older persuasion. What does that even mean?
I don't know, but that was PC.
You need to stop right there. I need to know what the
people.
older persuasion is. Can there be a young guy who's of the older persuasion?
Yeah, I guess
it's
all relative, right? Because I'm of the older persuasion to you.
The older persuasion is such a...
Okay, the older generation...
the older persuasion.
I'm sorry.
What are they persuaded of?
Your
that they're
PC
old?
is rubbing off on me. I've got to make sure that the YouTubers don't hate us.
To me. So why? All right. So they matter for the health of the church. I preached a sermon about this one time, and the way I framed it in the beginning was like this: here's all the verses, or here's some of the main verses in the Bible that encourage us to have intergenerational relationships. John 13:34, let us love, or 1 John 4:7, let us love one another, for love is of God. He who loves is born of God and knows God, and so on. John 13:34, a new commandment I gave you, that you love one another. And I pointed out how all these verses lead us towards intergenerational relationships, but none of them mention age, which is that a byproduct of loving one another is that we love literally all other people in the church. We gravitate sometimes towards make sure you love these people who you relate with, who you know. That was the way I framed it in the beginning. The only reason why I say that is if you had to answer questions for why do we struggle with this sometimes, good, faithful, well-meaning Christians struggle to apply this in their lives, what would you say are the reasons that are causing this disconnect that is problematic in some ways?
Well, I think in the beginning, if you're not used to doing this, and I think sometimes it's easy for us in ministry, that's kind of our job, like make relationships with everybody, see if there's anything that anybody needs. But for your Joe Blow churchgoer, right, that it may not be their default to...
Joe Blow.
Your average Joe churchgoer, it may not be their default to build relationships with all different types of people and see if there's anything that anybody needs. And
a lot of that's because of the culture, again.
Yeah.
Like, we have the consumerist culture. Again, I don't go to Disneyland looking to meet people. I don't go to McDonald's looking to meet people. And church is another consumer thing for us in our culture today. So it's like, I don't go looking to meet people.
Yeah. I don't even know what I was going to say.
You're saying for the average guy, you're getting old, dude. You're of the older persuasion.
Yeah.
For the average guy, they don't come with the intention to meet people. So that's one of the reasons why we struggle with this.
Yeah, it's out of our comfort zone, right? Like we go in because we have conversations with my children all the time about how, like, to you, your world revolves around you. Like, but
yeah,
that's not the case, right? There are other people in this world. There are other countries and nations all over in this world. But when church is a great example. When we go in, like, the church world revolves around us, right? We want the service to be exactly like we want it. We want to sit where we want to sit. We want to talk to the people we want to talk to. We don't want to step outside that comfort zone, even if it may benefit the body by developing relationships with people outside of our comfort zone. So I think initially we've got this sense of, I don't want to do that. It makes me feel uncomfortable, which I think it is. It's hard to develop a relationship with somebody you don't have very much in common with. Maybe church is the only thing you have in common. Jesus is the only thing you have in common with this person. But the benefits of developing intergenerational relationships far outweigh the initial awkwardness that you may feel.
Yeah, and I do want to give some understanding to like the younger people. My generation is a generation of social anxiety, like to meet new people, stuff like that. And I'll be honest, I struggle with it myself. We were just raised more on technology and not on like face-to-face conversations and. I think, I don't know if I told you this before, but there have been times where I've planned to have lunch with someone that I didn't know very well, like another preacher or something, and I don't know what we relate on. I don't know what we're going to talk about. And we're like, sometimes this happens. You're a new minister in an area. Someone's like, hey, let's go grab lunch. Really, let's meet each other. And in my head, I'm like, dude, what are we going to talk about? And what I've done before, this is how bad, just to be totally transparent, the social anxiety can get. I have written down talking point notes on my phone, so that if the conversation dried out, I could have something to bring up right there so that there was no silence and no like, well, yep. Have you had that kind of I hate that. That's the worst thing for a young person like me sometimes. Yeah. So I think a reason why we don't reach out a lot of the time, and it happens on the older side too, but because it is awkward regardless of what generation to try to put yourself out there and make a new relationship. But man, the young people... I want to be nice, but we got to get over this social anxiety and push through it. Yeah. Like you said, these relationships are so worth it.
Yeah. It's, and being a youth and family minister, working with teenagers in today's culture, we see that a lot. We see kids come in, they'll sit down, never say a word the entire Bible class or the entire youth event, and to anybody, me or otherwise, and then just get up and leave. And it's like, why were you even here?
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that we need to get over. Not saying that it's going to be easy to get over. It's simple to comprehend in our minds, but it's extremely difficult at times to do in our lives. And but it's going to be something that benefits you years down the road, and is going to help you stick with the church.
Yeah, I've had people talk to me like with the realm of evangelism. The social anxiety is a real serious barrier. I've had people tell me things like, how do I get over the nerves of it? If I'm going to talk to like my friend about Jesus, how do I know that it matters. I know that their soul is on the line. I know how important this is. I know that as a Christian, this is my responsibility and my privilege to tell them, but I just feel so nervous to do it. What is the secret to doing it? And it sounds so obvious, but I tell them, you know what the secret is? The secret is walking up and talking to them about Jesus. Yeah. I don't know what the magic is to remove the social anxiety. Maybe for some people, once they see the value in it, the care for the anxiety goes down. But there are other people that I know the value in it, but it's still horrifying to think about doing that. All you have to do is just go and do it anyway. Right. And eventually it'll get easier. Yeah. But if you don't... I get that it's real, and I know to be PC, right? Yeah. If you talk about anxiety and stuff like that, it's real. I believe it exists, all that. But it's never a worthwhile excuse to say, therefore, because of this struggle that I have, this so important thing, I just get to neglect it. You have to push through it. You have to. Yeah,
and I think at times... in certain situations, it goes back to selfishness. Is this person worth it? Because maybe my friendship, my relationship that we can develop will severely, not severely is not the right word, will greatly impact their life in a positive way. And because I'm a little bit socially anxious, I'm going to refuse to bring about that opportunity in that person's life. But because when you look at it like that, then the anxiety should start to go away a little bit. But I mean, it's just having a conversation. I mean, looking at it from the eyes of a teenager talking to maybe a retiree, like, what do you care what the retiree thinks? I mean, like, it does not matter. Yeah. Just go talk to them. Say, what's up? How you doing? And that's one of the reasons that in my youth ministry, anytime we're doing a service project, and we try to do 4 or 5 a year, other than our mission trip, all of those service projects center around an elderly individual in our congregation, whether we're going to mow their yard or we're going to cut a tree down and cut it up for them or whatever. This last one we did in November before Thanksgiving, there were 4 elderly members of our congregation that we went to and said, what do you need done? And it just turns out that all of them needed a tree cut down, but and that was a way for us as a group to develop a relationship with this individual. So when we see them in the church building next time, it's not a stranger.
Yeah.
It's somebody we can talk to. They can check on us. They know who we are. They know our names. And we have created a bond through service, which is one of the best bonds you can make with somebody, serving together. We've created a bond through serving that will allow us to continue our relationship for years to come.
Yeah, I found that to be the case too. I've taken, like youth kids or something to do some kind of a help like that, and it's forever endearing for people. I know that a lot of the time, and not just to think about this from the youth perspective, but from the other side, from older generations reaching out to the younger, I've heard no shortage of people say, I remember there was a man who said, I taught youth classes for many years, and I just can't do it anymore. Why? Because I just don't relate to them anymore. I don't know what the music and the things and the this and that and the whatever words he used. He's, I just can't relate to them anymore. And his error was thinking that he had to like the same music as them and use the same lingo. He had to know what TikTok is or something to be able to relate to them. But what I found interesting is that I've heard people say that. Like, I just can't relate to the youth in the church area. We just don't have, why am I going to reach out? We don't have anything in common. I never hear people say that about their grandchildren. Yeah. I never hear them say, like, I don't talk to my grandson. Why? He watches, cartoons, and I watch Newsmax, or he likes whatever music, and I like whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they never do that. And what's the difference? The difference is, one of them is, I decide to be in this committed, loving relationship with you because you're my family, and the other one is, well, you're someone I go to church with. Yeah. And if that's ever going to be true, it should be true in the church.
Yeah. I mean, you said the key word. It's like a default you love your grandkids. Yeah. But it's not a default for you to love the kids in the church.
Who would say about their grandkid, like, I don't know if I love that kid yet. I'll get to know him probably at some point. Who knows? He's got to, or he needs to come to me and take some initiative and talk to me. Who would do that?
Yeah, nobody. And I mean, how many of you grandparents out there have like learned about something that interests your grandkids just because it interests your grandkids, right? Like, you do that because you love them, you want to develop a relationship with them. Why can't we do that with the kids within the church?
I know a grandmother who plays Pokemon Go on her own, on her iPad, when her granddaughter's not around, because that's her thing with her granddaughter. I mean, everywhere she goes. Yeah. She came and visited Seagaville, like for, I think for Melania's birthday. And she had her iPad open, Pokemon Go. She's got to like level up and stuff like that. She did not care about Pokemon Go before. She didn't care about Pokemon. I don't think she's ever watched Pokemon probably until her granddaughter. And she learned to enjoy it herself because of her good relationship with her granddaughter.
Yeah. Would she do that? Question. Would she do that with just a random kid in the church?
Exactly. That's the thing. I should be willing the same commitment to give that to everybody.
Because love is love, right? I mean, of course, there are different forms of it, but you love your grandkids. You love fellow members of your church body. You want the best for both categories here, and so why wouldn't we do the same types of things?
And you and me have heard no shortage of funeral services where the grandson goes up there and says, he was my best friend. My grandfather was my best friend. My grandmother was my best friend. They didn't like the same music. They didn't grow up in the same time. They didn't, so much of that stuff. And it's interesting. All the stuff that they don't relate on is like all the stuff that doesn't matter to God. Yeah. And I don't know if we're using it as an excuse or we just have the wrong priorities for what relates us. What do you think it is, like an excuse, or our priorities are wrong?
Well, I mean, it's probably a little bit of both, but like it takes work, right? Like it took work for that lady to learn about Pokemon Go. She probably had no idea what it was, but it takes work. But if you truly,
but it's worth noting, you don't even have to. But that's just an evidence of your investment.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It was kind of, it goes back to that video talking about the dads who didn't know anything about their kids. It's like, you're showing that you don't care. But if you're willing to step outside your own comfort zone, and learn a little bit of something about these kids and what they're interested in, just to make a connection with them, that shows them that you actually care and you do have their best interest at heart.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about, for all of you watching or listening out there, think about your relationship with a grandparent, and maybe your favorite grandparent or whatever. It was probably, for most of us, a really good, deep, personal relationship. You learned a lot from, you really valued the relationship, you respected them. Maybe a lot of times, even more so sometimes than our parents, right? We have this deep personal connection to our grandparents, and we learn a lot from them. Why can't we do that within the church?
Yeah.
Both ways, right? And there's this stigma on, I got to step outside my comfort zone. I got to do something I'm not really comfortable with. I don't want to do. But for the health of the entire church, for the health of each individual, it's crucial.
Yeah, I personally don't see my grandparents a lot. You know, they live in Los Angeles. I see them maybe once a year, and every single time I go to California, I have to see my grandparents. It's no question. In fact, what I do is typically the day after I land, the next morning, I go to breakfast with my grandparents. If possible, I try to get both sets of grandparents to have breakfast. I always pay too. Little single tear comes out, but because my grandparents certainly do enjoy themselves at breakfast. But I love it. It's so worth it. I can't go to California and not see my grandparents, and I need to have that mindset in my church family too. Is I can't come here and just neglect. I get it. I'm not going to be able to shake everyone's hand on Sunday morning, but as a general thought process, how could I just come here and just week after week just allow that relationship to stagnate or to atrophy in that way? I've got to emphasize this stuff. Maybe we can talk about this before we get into the last part. The older generation for me, and maybe you can speak to this from your own experience too. The older generation for me, the people of the older persuasion, they offer such a grounding for me that, for me, the biggest thing lately has been they show me that Christianity is possible. They show me that persevering is possible. And I used to think the biggest giants in the church were like the most smart preachers. And now I think the biggest giants in the church are these 70, 80, 90-year-old Christians who have gone through the fire for longer than I've been alive, longer than my parents have been alive. And every time I show up to the building, they see me, they smile, they hug me, they tell me they love me, they encourage me, they take me out to lunch. Those are literally my heroes, spiritually speaking. That's what they offer for me. And it breaks my heart sometimes that people don't take advantage of those relationships that are possible for them. What would you say they offer for you?
I think they offer for me just a really great example that it is possible to live a godly, faithful life for decades and still be happy on the other end, right? So many times our culture says that, being a Christian is such a downer. You can't do this, you can't do that, but it's such a fulfilling life. And those people of the older persuasion, old people in the church who have been faithful for decades are the best example of that, because they're all so bubbly and happy and just excited to see you and excited to be there. And for me, it's the example. There are things I can learn from them, ministry things, familial things. But for me, it's just watching. Wow, you're such a powerful example. You're here every single time the doors are open or whatever the example may be, and you can barely see 10 feet in front of your face, and you're still here. Whatever they're dealing with, they are here. And I'm like, I get up and I'm a little bit tired and I don't want to go. I'm like, think about this. That's
so true. I've been in situations where I'm like, oh man, I really don't feel like I can go today, and then I do show up, but I feel like such a loser sometimes because I'm all complaining. I'm so tired. I'm like grumpy or whatever on the way over to the building and trying to get my mind right. And then I show up and there's like elderly people who are like hobbling, and they're in pain. And
one hip out of socket.
Yeah, I know. I'll ask them, I'll say, how are you doing? They're like, honestly, horrible. Yeah. My body is falling apart right now.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm standing right now.
And there they are. Just recently, I mean, this isn't like an older person, but a member here just had surgery, and she's been going through rehab, very painful, very uncomfortable. And she came to services on Sunday, and I asked her how she doing. She goes, horrible, but I want to be here so bad.
Yeah.
I thought if I'm going to suffer in pain, I'd rather do it here.
Yeah.
And I've heard no shortage of people, mainly older people, say stuff like that. If I'm going to suffer in pain, at least I get to be with you.
Yeah.
At least I get to worship God together with the church. And like I said, they make me feel like such a loser whenever they say stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're just being themselves. They're just being Christians. But man,
Yeah.
they make you feel real small sometimes. Man, I'm such a weak.
Yeah. You know, a part of it is especially for the younger generation, a part of it is just a level of maturity and being able to recognize those things. They just see an old person in a pew, right? We see who are a little bit older. We get to see wisdom, and we get to see depth, and we get to see perseverance in those people that maybe the younger generation just can't recognize yet due to maturity issues or whatever. But it's one of those things that as youth leaders, especially as parents, we need to develop in our children the ability to recognize those things and to discern their importance in the life of the everyday Christian.
Yeah. Have you heard that saying before? It was, I think they use it in sports. It was like, or like in war, it was like, beware of an old man in a world where men die young, or something like that. And it's like, they used it about like Tom Brady or something. It's like, he's still around. He's still kicking.
Yeah.
Greatest football player, quarterback ever. Anyway, you want to talk about it? No? Okay, fine. But I really do think that a version of that applies to Christians. It's like you need to really revere, look up to, and take advantage of the relationship you can have with someone in a world where Satan is nipping at their heels all the time, and where they've seen countless people fall away and pull out of the fire because it was just too much for them. These people who are still sticking around after all these years. I see pictures of some of the members here at Seagoville, and when they were my age, and like the pictures are in black and white and stuff, they're still sticking around.
Yeah.
And man, that's when they go through something, and I go through it the exact same thing. 9 times out of 10, they're going to handle it way better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to be around people like that.
Yeah.
I need to be around people like that.
And sometimes we forget, like, you know, our lives are not endless, right? Like we're not going to be able to utilize that resource forever. Right. Their knowledge, their experience. And even if you kind of turn the tides and shift the focus to the older generation looking at the younger generation, they're not going to be the younger generation forever. And so if there are some things you want to learn about life, about culture, about whatever, and gain some wisdom from the younger generation, I mean, eventually they're going to become...
What do you want to be when you reach that age?
Yeah. I mean, it's you really have to understand that there's a window that's closing here. And eventually you'll have to develop a different relationship with another generation. But it's extremely important for us to be willing to develop these relationships. I try to make it a habit, especially early on in my ministry, is every Sunday, if there's somebody I don't recognize, and I'm not just talking like visitors, like maybe members of your congregation that you don't know, maybe you know their name, but you've never really met them. Every Sunday, go up and meet somebody new. Right. And just tell them who you are, and over time, develop a relationship with them and see how you can help each other through your own walks with Jesus.
For the young people watching or listening, I get it. I'm not cool. Tyler isn't cool.
Yeah. And
most certainly the old people aren't cool.
Yeah.
That's the way the young people see it.
Yeah.
Like, what does a friendship with Tyler or someone who's older, like, what does that add to me? They're not cool, they don't relate to me. What are they? I understand that on a superficial level, but if you care in a serious way about your spiritual well-being, your relationship with God, again, you've got to pursue these relationships. And again, on the other side, if you're older and you probably feel the same way, what am I going to get out of a relationship with this 20-year-old who doesn't like the same things I like? They're going to college. I didn't go to college. I dropped out in middle school and I just started working. We have different lives. I was drafted, whatever it is. We have this tendency on this superficial level to say, what does this relationship offer me?
Yeah.
There's one side, I think a good way to frame it is the younger side needs them more than they realize. The older side needs them more than they realize. But yeah, when I'm younger, I need someone to ground me in this way spiritually. And the older need to invest. And I think they'd be surprised too how much they get out of these relationships. Big time.
Yeah.
With the last part here, so how do people do this? I know we talked about getting over the social anxiety service projects. Do you have more to say about that? Do you have other ideas?
Well, all of my ideas are going to be kind of focused towards a youth and family ministry. You know, one of the things that we try to do in our youth ministry is really encourage other adults in the congregation to join us in the things that we're doing, whether we're doing service to other members of our congregation or we're having a meal together as a youth group. We allow and we encourage other adult members, even that have nothing to do with the youth ministry, to come and to join us and to hang out, to host things, so that those relationships can be developed. At Landmark, I have a really good youth and family ministry in the sense that we have really involved parents, always want to be there. You know, when we're doing a devotional on Sunday nights, we always have 5 or 10 parents over in the corner just sitting and talking and hanging out, and a lot of our kids will run up to other parents, other adults, and just cut up with each other. I mean, it's a great opportunity for that to happen, but you've got to create things on the calendar that are not just age-isolated events, right? Well, we got this thing on the youth calendar, so everybody's going to bring their teenagers, and they're going to drop them off, and Tyler's going to have to deal with them for 3 hours. And you've got to create things that encompasses the entire family, right? That's why I embrace youth and family minister now, because we pull the family into everything. We go on retreats together, and we do all things like that. But congregationally, it's important to have events, potlucks, things like that include everybody, right? That are not just tailored towards a particular generation. It's good to have those things as well, but make something that everybody can enjoy.
Yeah, I've heard preachers kind of sometimes go too far with this and be like, it's a problem that in the church we have like a youth Bible class, a young adult Bible class, an adult Bible class, and like a married class, whatever. Like, no, there's a time and place for those things. We shouldn't vilify those things at all. But we shouldn't have all those separate things at the expense of the things that also bring us together.
Right.
We can have the best of both worlds.
Right.
And again, sometimes there's missed opportunities when the church, when everything they do is together. And so therefore the Bible classes, there's no specifically tailored Bible class to anybody. There are downsides to that, for sure.
Yeah.
You can have it and be totally fine and good as a church. There's just downsides. And the opposite is true. You have everything separate, there's downsides to that too.
Yeah.
So why don't we try to have the best of both worlds and do this? I remember I brought this up one time to a group of preachers, and I said, hey, what are your ideas for how we could fix these kinds of relationships? And different to what you said, they were like, well, I hear that there's like this program out there where we can do this, or, maybe we can do this thing where the elders have like a list of names. They put a bunch of names together, like an older person's name, a younger person's name, and they call them to make sure that those people are talking. And like, so one elder is in charge of like these 20 people, and he's like, hey, have you called that youth kid, or youth kid, have you called this old guy? And that ideas like that. Maybe we have a program where people can sign up and take a youth out to lunch, or a youth make sure to personally invite an older person to a game of theirs or something like that. And the elders check back and make sure that they're doing that. And that's all fine. That's all well and good. It just seems like this isn't something. Maybe instead of all that, you can just do that on your own.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, maybe you can just decide to do that and not say like, well, we need the elders, or we need like the preacher, whatever, to organize this, and so that we can do this, make it easy for us, whatever. You take all the work out of it.
Yeah.
Basically, it seems like, I don't want to say it's antithetical, but it's not completely true to the spirit of what the church family is, which is, I shouldn't need a program or something to just walk over to you and say, hey, I've got a basketball game on Thursday. If you're free, I'd love it if you were there.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. Hey, youth kid, when are your basketball games? I want to be there. Or older person says, you and your parents want to come have lunch together with me and my wife? Stuff like that, it goes such a long way. Or to the college student that, whatever the situation might be. I mean, stuff like that goes such a long way.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't need to be forced. Maybe we shouldn't need a program with a cute name and a logo, and it's on the little slideshow on Sunday mornings before service starts. I don't know. Does that sound like a pipe dream?
No. I mean, well, it's probably a pipe dream, as in our church culture may not accept it, but I think you're onto something. I mean, I think we So many times in the church, we think a program is going to save a certain aspect where we're lacking, and oftentimes it just creates more headache and turmoil and drama. And I think this would be one of those cases. It's just about doing what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's
as
like
Christians.
This isn't a program. This is us. This is our family.
Yeah, this is what I mean. It's like let's create a program to love each other. Like, no, that's just what we're supposed to do.
It's like I follow this program to love my wife and be a good husband to her. It's like I need this workbook or something. It's like, dude, one, God's already left you the workbook. You know, He's giving you His word
workbook right here.
It's pretty good, but like, yeah, again, for something so simple, it just seems like almost an offense. And against the spirit of what these relationships are supposed to be like, I need some kind of a structure to tell me to do this or something like that.
And it's all about stepping outside your comfort zone, thinking about something bigger than yourself, and being willing to put somebody's well-being above your own. Mm-hmm. And if we all had that mindset in every aspect of our lives, but especially in the church, especially when it comes to intergenerational relationships, we would have no issue at all developing them, and we would begin to see over a period of time the fruits of that labor come out individually, in our families, and within our entire congregation.
Yeah. I know that not everyone has good family situations, but generally people know what it's like to be in a loving family. And I wish sometimes that we connected those dots. We connected the dots of like, this is how I love my biological family. And God gave me this institution, not just to have all these rules, but to teach me something about what relationships are supposed to be, my relationship with Him, the foremost. But there's a reason why the church is also called the household of God, the family. God wants me to apply these same principles to my spiritual family that I'm going to take with me to the other side of this life, into eternity. I wish the people who don't take advantage of these relationships, I wish that the younger people knew the older people the way I know them. I'm thankful that I've really prioritized this, and I don't put one group over the other. I try to get to know everyone as much as I can. I wish the younger people knew the older people the way I know them, and some of them do. Obviously, it's not a blanket statement at all. A lot of them do, but the same is true on the other side. I wish the older people could find out what they're missing out on in not having these relationships or barely investing into these things. I wish they knew that if you really deeply invest, you will very well save souls because of this. You will keep them close to Jesus or bring them to Jesus in the first place.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we're out of here?
No, I totally agree. And especially for the younger generations, developing this skill early will allow you to maximize the benefit for yourself and for your congregation for years and decades to come. If you've got this skill when you're in your 20s, then every generation that comes through, every decade that passes, you can develop and strengthen and grow that skill, even teaching it to others just by your actions and the way that you live. Because this is something, not only is it a good idea for congregations to do this, individuals in congregations to do this, but I mean, it's commanded of us, right? I mean, I'm looking at Psalm 145, verse 4. It says, one generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. And it's not like, yeah, this would be a good idea for you, or, if you want your church to thrive, then you should probably do this. It's like, no, that's what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
If you're going to call yourself a Christian, if you're going to label yourself with Christ's name, these are one of the things I want you to be about.
Yeah, there's so many passages, like in Titus chapter 2, there's passages about the older women teaching the younger, exhorting the younger man to be sober-minded, all these other things. There's so many passages that emphasize these relationships, examples. Moses needed Joshua and vice versa. Paul needed Timothy and vice versa. There's so many examples of this stuff. And how silly would it have been for Moses to be like, Joshua, he hasn't gone through everything I've gone through, or Paul to Timothy, right? He hasn't gone through everything I've gone through. We're missing out on so much. We're missing out on the very things that unite us and that we can use in our spiritual lives. It also stands out to me that I asked you if you had any final thoughts. You said no, and then you shared a final thought.
I might have another final thought.
You do?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for being here, for listening to us. Tyler, thank you for being here, dude.
Thanks for having me, man.
You're the man. What a cool guy is Tyler Redman. We'll be back sometime soon, Tyler and I, to do some of this. He's a good podcast buddy. Podcast buddy, that's good.
Body buddy.
I won't even touch that. Thank you all so much for being here. I love you. Take care. See you next time. Goodbye.
I do too.